Hello and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansevieri
and Amy Cornell.
And this is a really fun, I love the twist on the book launch because Amy and I were talking about this the other day, and I think that so often authors treat their book launch as a one-time event. And we're going to kind of turn that on its head. So get ready. Take lots of copious notes. Text the word podcast to 888-402-8940 to send us your show ideas, your questions, show feedback, all the things. We love our little podcast group. We hear from them all the time. So thank you for that. So this is really kind of an interesting concept because successful books aren't just launched once, they're launched repeatedly. And we're going to break down what that is in this show. So talking a little bit about, not necessarily, so we're not talking about re-releasing the same, where you have to revamp the cover and we just put the book back on Amazon for the first time. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is with the same book, giving a reason to launch it again and again and again. And we're going to give you some ideas. Amy, when we talked about book launches, what do you think the number one thing is that authors get wrong with when they launch their book? And I feel like just put you on the spot. So I'm really sorry about that.
No, it's okay because we're actually kind of working with a current client through this. It's their first book. And so we're kind of processing this together,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a mental shift. But I think a lot of authors have been trained to treat the launch as some sort of finish line where it's your make or break moment. That's it,
Yes.
And if it doesn't go well or doesn't go exactly how you planned, or if everything doesn't happen at once, then you've wasted all that time, money, and energy, and it's a wash, which is honestly just the opposite of what we really would like authors to view releasing and maintaining a book.
Right, exactly. Because sometimes, look, launch day, when I teach this class, I have this slide deck and I give, here's what you expect from launch day. And it's the American Idol where, or I forget now, America's Got Talent, I think it is, where the golden tickets drop and the buzzer goes off and everything's really excited. But this is what launch day actually looked like. And it's like this cat standing in a room by itself holding a black balloon. It's really depressing because a lot of times our launch days don't really live up to our expectations. And that's actually okay. Because what I want you to start thinking, and look, if you have multiple books out and you have a huge newsletter list, your launch days probably look like the America's Got Talent golden tickets thing, right? For the majority of us, though, that's not the case. So think about your launch day. And if you just launched a book and you're like, oh, this is the episode that I need, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Think about it as data collection and market testing phase, right? So this is a really good opportunity for you to take, to reframe your launch. And as opposed to saying, I didn't get the big party I was expecting, instead, look at what worked and what didn't work and use that as data, right?
Right. It's not, this is where I win or lose. This is where I learn.
Oh my gosh, I love that. We need to put that on something.
I know. At this point, I have like an entire closet of things that I won't put on a t-shirt. So I'm going to run out of space soon. But
that's amazing. I love that.
But truly, there's so much to learn because these are human beings that are buying your book that you are potentially trying to intrigue. And they're very complex and there's so much that's out of your control. So approaching a launch as this very controllable ecosystem, you're just setting yourself up for frustration.
Exactly. And, in truth, for the majority of us, the first launch doesn't tell you if your book works, but it does tell you what to fix.
Perfect. Yes.
Which I think, and we've done a ton of shows on this. Why you want to, this is not about failing early, but you want to spend the time smartly to look and see, okay, this is what worked and this is what didn't. Launching 3 times, launching 4 times. We're actually going to talk about, different ideas to launch your book 4 times. So I think the first type of relaunch might be the visibility launch, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first one. That's the early book distribution. If you have an advanced reader group, that's amazing. Your initial Amazon setup, potentially limited, audience exposure, especially if it's your first book. So that's your first launch is your visibility launch. We've all done it. We've all had a visibility launch, whether it went good or bad. The reality check is that generally with your first launch, you have a fairly low review count, usually under 10.
Normal.
Not a lot of social proof. You're still kind of working out your messaging.
Yes.
And the problem with and the framework around your initial launch is that authors expect peak performance from what is essentially a cold start.
Right. It's like not warming up if you're an athlete, right? You're going to get injured. You're going to be out of the game for a while.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah, exactly. Amy, launch idea number 2, the proof launch.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So this is where you start gaining credibility and you start actually converting people. Well, this is where you start feeling like you're getting some responses and you're like, okay, all this work has been worth it. And but listen, this is the second launch. So that's why, stick it through the first one, learn, don't just sit there and pout. The learning part is important, right? Like you can't just sit there and wait for the second one to come around to start feeling better about yourself. You really do have to learn what's going on in the first one. But during the second launch is when you start seeing more reviews. If you're putting in the work, reviews generate more reviews. That's your social proof. People like what other people like.
Yes.
So if you get more reviews, you are going to start seeing more reviews because you look like more of a sure thing, which means more people are going to be clicking buy. You're going to start getting more people converting. You're going to start the reviews in this stage too are really important because a lot of times these early adopters for your book, when they do review, they're giving you pretty candid feedback, so you can learn from that as well. We've done shows specifically on how to make the most of the reviews that you do have. And that was a huge one, is how much you can learn from those, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So essentially what you're saying is that this is kind of a pivot in everything, all your collateral pieces, the pitching that you're doing, as opposed to saying, this is a new release. You're saying, look at this book, like that leaders are calling, just as an example, leaders are calling the most practical burnout guide that they've read this year. Because that could be a whole new pitch, a whole new way to go after a new market.
And candidly, so much more powerful than just another book is out. No offense,
No, you're right. Exactly. Because, book published every 8 seconds. Yeah, that's not new. But
no. So yeah, that's another reason. Like, take some of the pressure off this initial launch because a book coming out is really not that big of a deal. But what you get to say about your book as you move into like the second, third, fourth phase makes it such a stronger presentation.
Yeah.
And it makes it so much more appealing than just another new book, because when you're just another new book, you're one in thousands daily, literally, So if you're actually learning and pivoting and refining your language, refining how you're appealing to your markets, that's when you actually start becoming a unique product.
Exactly. I love that. And then the third launch is the opportunity launch, right? So the focus of this launch is going to be relevance. So attaching your book to seasonal, right, which works for pretty much everybody, fiction, nonfiction, cultural, pop culture, and anything that might be going on, in the world. Maybe you wrote a fiction book about a royal wedding, and now there's a big royal wedding, and that could, so there's anchor moments, news cycles if you've written nonfiction, right? And what we're talking about really is that you're using this essentially as a pivot to say, okay, this is now my third launch, and I am now going to anchor it to a season something that's going on. And we actually did a whole show on anchoring your book to things that are already kind of buzzing. So I forget now the name. I forget now the title of the episode in particular. I should have had that at the ready, but we did a show on that. So anchoring yourself to topics that are currently buzzworthy. So definitely take a look at that, because that is your opportunity launch. That's an opportunity for you to now latch on to something that, it's much more easy. It's easier, excuse me. Let me see if I can actually speak English today. It's easier to get people interested in something they're already interested in, which I know is kind of a weird turn of phrase, but it's very, very true. So anchoring your book, use that as the third opportunity launch. Amy, do you want to go over the fourth one? I really love this one, because I love having conversations with authors about launch number 4. So I'm going to have a lot of strong feelings.
Absolutely. This is market expansion. So this is new formats. So we're talking new audiences, new retail visibility, new promotional angles. And this is why when authors ask us, we typically recommend that they don't put every single format of the book out there all at once, simply because usually that's not necessary, But so audiobooks, hardcover, large print, the more niche market formats are all ones that you can save for later, because then you can treat it like a brand new release. So you can appeal to people that are audiobook people. You can appeal to people that are specifically, especially depending on the kind of book you write. But if a hardcover version of your book makes a lot of sense based on, the genre, the topic, and who your buyers are, I mean, that's huge. That's giftable. That's very much, oh my gosh. I mean, we could go down rabbit holes with this, but there are so many tiebacks. Now I feel like we have to put it in the show notes. There are so many tiebacks to our anchoring episode that we did, for gift markets and things like that are so important. And then large print, accessibility, libraries love large print books too. Yeah. So that's a whole other campaign that you can essentially do around a large print release and really put your focus on libraries, library networks. I mean, there's just so much you can do with it. And what I also love about it, which sounds, overly simplistic, but it also lets you breathe a little bit in between doing all the things at once, right?
Well, yeah. And it also, like we were saying, it also really realigned your perspective on my first, as opposed to saying, like, my first launch wasn't very successful. No, my first launch was that was my starting point. And now I'm going into all of these things. The other reason that I really love the format, the market expansion, is because so many times I talk to authors and they say, I'm launching my book in all of these editions and I'm launching them all at once. And I'll ask them, I'll say, why? Start with the paperback and the ebook, add the audiobook later. Like, as you said, every single time that you put out a new edition of the book, that is a new opportunity to market the book as if it was a brand new book. So you have all of these opportunities. Don't fire them out all at once. Sometimes, obviously, you don't have a choice depending on who you publish with and whatnot, but it's a really, really good opportunity. And I think that it is, the truth of the matter is that the post-launch reality of book launching, of launching your first book, is fatigue and disappointment and assuming that the market decided. And this is part of the reason we just did a show on book sales. And this is part of the reason why books, why authors see significantly low sales numbers, I think personally, and I think Amy would agree, is because you've launched your book, you've sold maybe, 50 copies and 49 of them were to people that right? Nope. Or your mom bought 49 copies or whatever to give out to her friends at garden club or whatever. And you make the assumption that the market decided. Maybe the market didn't decide. Maybe the market just wasn't aware, because basically it was a cold launch, and the majority of us, the majority of authors don't have a lot of time or bandwidth potentially to do a huge ramp up. And even if you do, it's still, if this is your first book especially, it's still somewhat of a cold launch, right?
Right. And I think a big one too, when we talk about how this is a process and there are only so many controllable factors, like timing is huge. And we're not saying timing as in you didn't pick the right time. That's not what it is, but there's just so much that happens over the course of a book's life and your progression as an author that add to your credibility, that add to your platform, that make you a more appealing choice. And we've talked about this a lot recently. We've been trying to remind authors more and more that the biggest hurdle is not the cost of your book or anything like that. It's really convincing people to take a chance on you when they don't know who you are.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
that's huge. And that's not anything you can control, but you can kind of close the gap on that risk factor involved with them taking a chance on you with doing the right things over time.
Exactly.
Your platform will mature, your reviews will make a difference, the tweaking of your language and your positioning. I mean, and Penny mentioned connecting your book to things happening in the world that people are already paying attention to. So external relevance is huge as well. That may just not be at your fingertips when your book comes out. And you
Yeah.
can't control what's going on in the world. But there might be something coming up where you go, oh my gosh, here's a big moment for me. And same thing with seasonal. Your book may have been ready to come out and you were ready to go. And then you realize 6 months down the road, like, oh my gosh, now it's summer reading season. And my book is the perfect. I can do something big around summer reading by the pool on vacation because people are looking for books that time. You know what I mean? Books
Mhm.
like yours. So
Mhm.
there are so many things that can happen as time goes by that you have to be willing to embrace that you absolutely can't just demand at your launch.
No, it's really true. And 95% of books are sold word of mouth or through the recommendation ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to that word of mouth or recommendation ecosystem on day one. You
No.
just you just don't. And that's the thing that can really help to, as you start to build over time. The majority of books, honestly, I mean, when we hear about books that just do well out of the gate and everybody has to have them, generally that's, not the author's first book. That's not the author's first rodeo. It's rare that books just spike right out of the gate, right? And that's where revisiting and reconfiguring how you perceive your launch, success or failure, to be. Even if your launch was a success, I think you should still do this. I really think that, and we say this a lot on this podcast, especially, every tool in your toolkit should be used, especially in this kind of an environment. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't need a new, so a lot of times, authors will say, so I'll talk to authors on the phone of like, my first book didn't do really well, so I wrote a new book. Because you don't need a new book. And this is not to say that you should just rely on one book to make you successful, right? We always say keep writing. One hit wonders are extremely rare, but you don't need one book. You just need a new way to talk about the book that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, I hope that this has been, did I miss any points, Amy, that we really wanted to really hit home? Did I miss
No,
anything?
no, I hopefully everybody feels really inspired, honestly,
Yeah, me
because
too.
yeah, I hope a lot of you that are in the trenches already are going, okay, great. I'm not actually behind. I'm pretty much where I'm supposed to be. And if you keep listening to shows, then obviously you're doing things smarter, you're doing things more strategically. And it's really about building that credibility. I think that's really a huge thing now is that you just have to keep going after proving that it's worth taking a shot on your work.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something you have to keep trying to earn. It does, it doesn't until you don't have to anymore, and then congrats. Like
Right, right. Congrats. We want to know you. But and it's really true. And I am actually going to link that other show in the show notes because we refer to it now a few times about, um, anchoring your book to buzzy things and things that are going on. And I think it's definitely, if you haven't listened to it, it's definitely worth the listen. We'll put it in the show notes. But the truth is, your book doesn't need a better launch day. It just needs more chances to be discovered. So if you're listening to this and you launched a book and you feel like a big failure, revisit that mindset and look at this a different way.
Right.
Grab from it what you could learn and move on to your next launch day, because you have a lot of them yet to come. Amy, go ahead. Sorry.
No, and I was going to say, I don't think we remind authors of this enough either, that Amazon rewards you for staying engaged with your books.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that to the table. I love that.
Yes, the algorithm rewards you for staying engaged in your own success, which is, if there was one reason why you can't treat your first launch as your only opportunity, it should be that. Mm-hmm. Because Amazon will not reward you for showing up once for yourself. You really have to, and that's where even making strategic tweaks to your description throughout the years, to your A+ content, to your author central content, all of these things, Amazon notices when you're doing things with your book. Honestly, one new review a month tells Amazon that people are still interested. I mean, it's small, but it's that little bit of a difference that really does matter.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That is absolutely true. I love this show, and I hope that this has inspired you. If you launched your book and it was less than what you expected, I hope this has inspired you to kind of go back to the drawing board and revisit that and consider new launches. And we love to hear from you. So please leave us a review, first off, wherever you listen to podcasts. But text the word podcast to 888-402-8940. Let us know what you thought of this episode or any episode. Send us your questions, your show ideas, all the things. And we will see you next week. Bye-bye.